What is up, everybody? Thank you for joining. I appreciate it. I am Kevin Iole. I appreciate you joining me. I am joined right now by my friend Doug Vazquez of Sports Illustrated. He is the senior producer. Doug, welcome. Thank you for getting up and well, I guess not, you're on the East Coast now, so not getting up early.
Yeah, thanks for having me. No, I'm over down in the Jersey Shore getting ready for 316. Gonna head up to Newark on Friday, so visiting some friends down here. So thanks for having me.
I appreciate you. Yeah, I know you've moved to Vegas, and every fight I go to, you're there. So it seems like you're enjoying the fight scene in Las Vegas. What has that transition been like going from back east, where you get a fight every now and then, to now you're in Las Vegas and you're in the middle of the action all the time?
I mean, it's been amazing. I moved there full time in September, and so you're right in the middle of Dana White Contender Series. There's just so many events going on at the Apex, so I've really taken advantage of that since I moved to Las Vegas. And like you said, just keep showing my face at the Apex. I love the fights. Right, the Apex gets a bad rep. I'm lucky because I live in Las Vegas and I get to go there, so I have a good impression of the Apex. But yeah, the transition's been great. Vegas is a great city. It's becoming like the sports capital of the country, right? Where we're getting all these professional teams. The fight scene is alive and well. Boxing's doing well. So yeah, it's been great.
Well, let's start an argument. What the hell, right? You know, I don't think Vegas is one of the best sports cities in the country. I think it is the best sports city in the country, and we'll let people argue with us. But you look at it. So right now we have an NHL and an NFL team. We have Top Rank based here. We have UFC based here. We have a Formula One race. You know, we did have PGA Tour golf. We lost that, but we have LPGA Tour golf. You know, the Super Bowl's been here. The NFL draft has been here. The Final Four is coming here. You know, so what don't we have here in Las Vegas? So I think, you know, more probably than any other city in the country, big events to Las Vegas is the city.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're both East Coasters, right? I'm a Boston guy, you're a Pittsburgh guy, big sports cities. So the sports vibe is a little bit different, but there's always something going on. The Knights, unfortunately, they made the playoffs. Their playoff run ended a little short, but there's, you know, that crowd is electric. I got to go to my first game at T-Mobile and see them. WrestleMania was just there. Like you said, there's just events and events going on. So the transition's been good. I'm biased. I'll still say Boston. It will always be the best sports city in the country, but Vegas is a close second for sure.
You know, nobody has the depth and breadth of events that are in Las Vegas. There's no city. You can't, you know, especially on a regular basis. Like, you know, you might get a golf major in the Boston area once in a while, or you might get, you know, the NCAA tournament, you know, going there. But like on a regular basis, you know, we don't have it scheduled yet, but I'm sure the national championship game will be played here at some point, right? They're going to build another arena for an NBA team here in town. I mean, this place is sick. And it's a can-do attitude among the people who run the city, which I love, right? So there's always, you know, people don't settle for good enough. Like they're always looking. Dana White building, like think about the Apex. People rip the Apex, right? But think of what the UFC is able to do with that, right? Fight Pass Invitational, you know, the fight night shows that they put there. There's so many. They could put boxing there if they wanted. And I think if there is a thing called Zuffa boxing or TKO boxing or whatever the hell they're going to call it. I think they could have a lot of the fights at the Apex, right? It's a TV production facility, which is important, and people don't understand that, but it's a TV production facility. But like Dana White could have said, hey, I could put my fights in ballrooms at casinos and all over the place, and they could have had that and no problem whatsoever. But, you know, their attitude was, hey, let's do it the best way, which is to own the product. And I think that that's what you see throughout Las Vegas, Doug. I know you haven't been here as long as I have, but I think that's sort of what Las Vegas is all about.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I forgot to mention when we were just talking, but even the football team, UNLV's football team, I've been able to experience some of those games, and the locals really get into that. They're coming off one of their best seasons in the last like 20 years, I think. So just in general, the sports scene here is unparalleled, even though I am biased towards Boston.
I'm glad. I love Pittsburgh, but we're gonna get into combat. I'm gonna say this last thing. UNLV football. Dan Mullen, a former Florida coach, is now the head football coach here. I have never understood why UNLV sucked in football. And I've lived here over 35 years, and UNLV has sucked like for 33 and a half of them, right? They've been terrible. One of the worst football programs in the country. So now last year, under the, what was the guy's name?
Barry Odom. Yep.
Barry Odom. Yeah,
Yep.
I forget his name. He already left us. So, but he turned it around. They had a good year last year. They went to a bowl game. And I think that's why you're seeing the passion that you saw. Finally they are winning. And
yeah,
I think,
the NIL landscape has changed a lot too. So hopefully that NIL money, UNLV will capitalize on some of that. And I think you're already starting to see it. So.
Well, let's talk. We got the Hall of Fame, Boxing Hall of Fame inductions this weekend. So if anybody wants to ask us any questions about that, UFC 316, Sean O'Malley getting another crack at the UFC Bantamweight Championship in the main event, going up against Merab Dvalishvili. So let's talk about that one. And let's first, you have an interesting take on Merab. So Merab is the Bantamweight champion. He's a guy, Doug, that I would say right now is winning fights on cardio. He's got a 12-fight winning streak, and that's probably unfair to a guy that is really a legit talent. But I mean, he's basically just pushing pace, and people can't keep up with it. That's where he's going. But you seem to think he's one of the more exciting fighters in the UFC.
I do. I think he, obviously he's not one of those exciting strikers, and we always talk about his cardio, but when you watch his fights and the way he conducts himself, like he's slamming Henry Cejudo in front of Mark Zuckerberg, and he's kissing Sean O'Malley in the back, and he's showboating against Umar. I think his I find his fights very exciting, and it has forward pressure. If you're an MMA fan, that's something we've never seen before. I mean, he has the record in the UFC for takedowns already, which is crazy. And outside of the octagon, I think he's really developed this brand, his social media brand. His skits are extremely funny. I'm sure he has some people helping him with the production of those, but he's just I think he's the funniest guy on the roster. And obviously the UFC looks at a guy towards Sean O'Malley, and he's a star in his own right, and he's a little bit more exciting. But Merab slamming Henry Cejudo in front of Mark Zuckerberg.
And talking to Zuckerberg while he did it.
And telling him what he's going to do. Yeah, I mean, the guy, and I've gotten a chance to talk to him now that I'm in Vegas. He lives in Vegas. I've got to spend some time with him, and he's just a great guy. He's very genuine. He just wants to fight. And I think his entertainment value is underrated, and maybe the UFC should push that a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you from the standpoint that I think, he's funny, and you probably seen him. He does a million of these videos where he's walking on the edge of, high-rise buildings, and, literally on the edge, and he's climbing in and out of windows, right? The guy is nuts,
out of his mind.
And that's kind of funny, and that translates sometimes into his fights. The thing that I don't like about his fights sometimes is that they're hard to score. They're hard to understand who is winning, because there's he's not doing a lot with takedowns. He gets you down, but then what's happening after that? He's not throwing a lot, right? He's not using his hands or throwing a ton of kicks, right? So he's there. So it makes it. Yeah, he's controlling. But do we, we're not supposed to score control per se. So it's an interesting situation.
I agree. And I mean, obviously he made the move to Syndicate MMA, and he's really working on his striking with John Wood. I got a chance to go to Syndicate the other day and got to see him in the cage, and he has power in those hands. And I do have a feeling when in this rematch, we're going to see him try to utilize that striking a little bit more. I mean, obviously he needs to stay at range against a guy like O'Malley, but I do envision a scenario where he comes out and shows us something a little bit different in this rematch.
Yeah, he says he's going to strike with O'Malley, and that would be the one way it seems like he loses the fight, right? And gives the title
Right.
back if he stands there and decides he's going to strike with Sean O'Malley. O'Malley has great instincts. I think if O'Malley chose to be a boxer, I'm not saying would be a world champion boxer, but I think he could contend and threaten for a world championship. He's quick, he's got great feet. He has. I think a lot of people forget about the eyes, right? He sees openings and he knows how to create openings with it. And so I think he's one of those guys that if he were a boxer, he would be a very good boxer. So if you're going to go in there and you're a Marab and you can ragdoll him and throw him around and everything, I think it's pretty stupid to sit there and say, I want to strike with him. But having said that, what they say before the fight and what they do in the fight are two different things usually.
Yeah, I mean, we did just kind of see a scenario with that with Bilal against JDM. Bilal did say, I'm going to stand and strike with him. I didn't believe him all week long leading up to that fight. I said, there's no way, and he stood and struck with JDM and he lost the fight. He was pretty proficient in his striking. It was a closer fight than you would think if you told me that these guys are going to stand for 25 minutes. But, yeah, well, what people say and what they do are two different things for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Here's what I think is going to happen. I think Marab, he's gonna try, right? He's gonna try something different. I think he wants to get a finish because I think that's the next level for him now. Is okay, you're winning these fights. You're on a 12-fight winning streak. I don't have his record pulled up in front of me, but how many finishes does he have over that last period of time? And I think he's going to look to get finishes, and to get a finish, you have to take a risk, right? Whether it's going for a submission or whether it's going to for a knockout via strikes, you have to take a risk. And so I think that's going to be the next level. So do I think he's going to stand there in the center of the octagon, point to the center like Max Holloway or Ilia Topuria and say, let's throw him? No, I don't think he's going to do that. But I would not be shocked, if he tried to, upset the apple cart with O'Malley, and when O'Malley isn't looking to throw, maybe throw with him and kind of have O'Malley off balance.
Yeah, I agree. But like you said, maybe there's a big question about what happens with Sean O'Malley after this fight. Obviously, if he wins, the story's different. But if he loses, what does the UFC do with him? Does he move up? Does he move down? Does he explore a boxing career? He's a lot different heading into this fight week too. I think he's been a lot more reserved. We know he says he quit smoking weed. He got off social media. So I think we're going to see two different fighters in this rematch, honestly.
Yeah, I think the fight's going to be different. I mean, here's the thing to me about O'Malley. I think O'Malley has enormous talent because I talked about that striking earlier, and I think he's one of those guys that, can knock out anybody in the weight class, whether they are a striker, I think he has that ability to knock anybody out. But he also has terrific grappling. People don't think of him as a grappler, but he does have a ground game, which is why I don't think you're going to see him go into boxing, right? Because, he's invested in that game, and he's what is he now, 30 years old? So it's going to be difficult for him to then just get his hands up to a level where he's going to be able to be competitive in boxing, because you're in MMA and you're working everything. You're not working your hands exclusively, but you go to boxing and that's all you do. You get up in the morning, you do your cardio, then you work your hands, and you condition yourself, but your hands are all you work on. You're going into this fight. What do you think O'Malley's working on in this fight? He's working on wrestling. He's working on stopping takedowns and sprawling and all that type of stuff so that he can stand up. So that's why I don't think he's going to go to boxing, but I think, that I do agree with you. I think if he loses this fight, he's got to look at how he lost and sort of, is there anything he can do? But I think he goes to 45 because he's got that tall, lean body, and I think he could compete at 45 and be successful there.
Yeah, and that 45 division, obviously Volk just got the belt back, but there are a lot of good fights for him in that division, and he could very well go on a title run there too.
And I think O'Malley's a guy that, they would put, I don't think if he loses to Murad that they would put him in a title fight right away at featherweight. He'd have to win something. But I think, you put him in there with a Diego Lopez or, somebody like that. And, all of a sudden, O'Malley's right near the top of the rankings in there. And, to me, now it's a fun fight. And then he's not that far away from Ilia Topuria, right? Ilia's one division ahead of him, and I think that would be a hell of a fight. Someday Ilia versus O'Malley. O'Malley puts a little bulk on, especially. Ilia walks around heavy.
Yeah, he's
Ilia
big.
is a big, he's short, but he's a heavier guy than people give him credit for. I don't know if you saw this, and I talked about this on one of my live chats before, and people were saying, this is not true, but he put a photo of a scale up, and he weighed 190. And everybody was saying, "Oh, it was phony," and blah 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 blah. I talked to Hunter Campbell, and he said, "I'm not saying he starts training camp at 190, but he does weigh 190 after fights, right?" Yeah. So he's a big dude, maybe too big for O'Malley, right? O'Malley's taller but not as thick. But to me, that's a fight. You got two mega personalities,
mega stars. Yeah,
someday you get them in there, look out. So let's make a pick on the fight. So give the people what they want. So who do you like to win? Do you think Merab defends? I think Merab is what, like a 3-1 favorite?
Yeah, and I was looking at the odds. The odds are kind of flipped for this rematch, where Merab was the underdog in the first match. I
just have DraftKings up here, so for what it's worth, Merab minus 285, Sean plus 230. The over/under is 4.5 rounds, which I think is probably a good number there. Over is minus 280, under is plus 210.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going with Merab here. I think if you're looking at it from a betting perspective, I think you're laying a little bit too much juice there, but you can look at things like you just mentioned, like the over 4.5 rounds. I mean, I envision Merab going out there and keeping the pressure and getting another decision. Like you mentioned before, he doesn't have that finishing power, but he does have that constant pressure. And I don't really care what O'Malley's worked on. I just think Merab's going to be too much for him again.
And I see a question. We'll get to the question in a second, but let's get to the co-main event there, Doug. Juliana Pena defending the title against Kayla Harrison. I'm looking at the odds right now. Oh my God. I mean, I thought it was high before. It's now up to Kayla Harrison minus 750. If you're betting the champion, you can bet $100 and bring back a 525 with a win, because she is plus 525. The over under there is 4.5. Over is plus $1.50. Under is minus 195. So everybody that's betting, obviously they're all betting Kayla Harrison in this fight. And I guess, Doug, that they're banking on Kayla Harrison is just a physical beast, right? And she's going to do that. Are they overlooking the fact of what she has to go through to make 135 pounds?
Yeah, I actually talked to Kayla earlier this week, and I talked to her about the weight cut. She is very regimented in what she does. She's very open and honest about how much of a struggle it is. But the way she explained it to me was, unfortunately, they don't have the 45 class. And my goal was always to be a UFC champion. And that's why I came to the UFC. Now, Juliana is saying it's because she ducked Cyborg. I don't really believe that. I don't think Kayla's ducking anybody. I think she really just wanted to come to the UFC, which is the best organization in mixed martial arts. But I've never been a big Juliana fan. I don't think she won the fight against Pennington, to be honest with you. I had it scored the other way.
I had Pennington winning, yeah.
So I think we just talked about big fighters. Kayla is just a physical specimen. There is a slight concern about the weight cut, but when I talk to her, she's very confident in the processes that she's going through. And I think she obviously gets the job done too.
I want to say this because this, is something I covered Kayla in the Olympics in 2012 and 2016 when she won in judo. And I think it was 2016, but it could have been 2012. And I'm not 100% certain what year it was. But I just remember her semifinal fight was over. She was coming to the media center, and I was walking. They had the loser on what they call the rope line. Have you ever covered the Olympics?
No, I haven't. Just remotely, I have with some video stuff, but I've never.
Yeah, so they have at the Olympics. They have like a rope, and they have sometimes in some sports they have both fighters, both athletes, or all the athletes on the one side. But in this particular day, they had to lose her on the other side of the rope line, and she would walk to different people and do, interview, and then leave, as opposed to doing one big press conference. So I was interviewing the loser, and then I go to, my seat because I know, Kayla's going to come. And as I turned, I bumped into Kayla, and she was fighting at, I think it was 170 pounds, right? And this is no lie. I mean, it was like I hit a brick freaking wall. I mean, she is so big and so strong and so thick. So my take is this, Juliana is interesting because she has gotten to the top of the game without that one defining skill. You think of Cyborg, you mentioned the power. Amanda Nunes, obviously the striking, the power. Kayla Harrison, the judo. Ronda Rousey, the judo. Misha Tate, the wrestling. But what is it that you say, would you point to that, hey, this is what Juliana's thing is, right? She's just tough. And she's she's like one of those bugs, you step on it and you squashing it and it still runs away, right? And I think that that's a tough person to beat, especially when all the pressure is going to be on Kayla. And we don't know how is Kayla going to deal with the weight cut.
Yeah, I mean, the weight cut thing we always talk about in combat sports. It's there are some health repercussions. Kayla was open about her struggles last time with the weight cut. So I don't know. Maybe it's time for a 45 division. We need to go out there and find some more talent to get some bigger girls. And Kayla made a big point. Like, there's women of all sizes. Like, there could potentially be a heavyweight division someday. Unlikely, but Kayla thinks it's a possibility.
Let's talk about what people say, because that's the important thing. I want to throw this out there at you. People complain about in the UFC that the heavyweights suck. And I won't argue, right? You got Jones, you got Aspinall that are great, some other ones that are good, and then there's not much depth. But the problem is, that in a combat sport, an individual, most of those athletes are playing other sports, right? They're playing team sports, soccer, football, basketball, baseball, right? They're not, so heavyweights, and then you're splitting the heavyweights in MMA with boxing. So, even if MMA is getting more of them, you got to, split them with boxing, so you don't have a pool big enough. And I think that's the same thing true of featherweight. And you can make a class, right? But there's going to be 2 or 3 good ones, and then everybody else is going to absolutely suck, right? Yeah. And do we want to see, just because we want to say we have 10 people fighting that are 145 pounds, when they had Amanda there, so I think that's something that they go. But let's make a pick on the fights. Are you going to lay that money and take Kayla Harrison, or how are you going to go?
I like Kayla Harrison inside the distance. I think she looks really focused. I like her to get a finish. I don't have that prop pulled up here.
It's over 4.5. So you like it inside the distance. So under is minus $1.95.
Yeah, that is a little bit of juice. I'll see if that line moves at all during the week leading up to Saturday. But I like Kayla to get a finish. I think she's highly motivated to get a finish here. So.
Well, we could go on, but we got some questions, Doug. So what do you say we hit the questions, and we'll get something here. So good morning, Loner. Thank you for the question. What do you think why do you think the petition to strip has reached 250,000? Do you think Mr. Dana will acknowledge it? So let me, I wrote a column on this last week. So Doug, I'm going to get your opinion on should Jones be stripped or whatever. I wrote a column on it, so I want to answer that question. And I think it's too early at this point, right? He defended the title in November. So nobody's obligated to defend the title more than one time a year. So right now, to say you want to strip him, it's just because we want to see the Aspinall fight, no other reason, right? You want to see the Aspinall fight, and you're impatient that Jones isn't doing it. I think Jones is messing with Aspinall, and I think he's messing with you guys, right? He's out there, he's playing with your head, and he's, getting attention, and he's traveling the world and making money and having fun. I do believe they're going to fight in New York in November, Doug. And I think what's happened was it was either going to be a fight in Las Vegas in June for International Fight Week or at Madison Square Garden. I think Jones, somewhere along the line, decided it's going to be Madison Square Garden. And so that's where they're going to put him. I just don't think they've announced it yet. So you can have a million signatures on that, and until November comes, it's nothing. Now, if we get to November and Jones is saying I won't fight him, well, then I think that's a different story. But that is still, 5 months away. So we'll deal with 5 months down the road. But I do think he's going to fight. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit before we went on air. I think the fight happens. I do think that Jones is just like he does with all of his opponents. He's employing some mental warfare here. And I also think, I mean, you probably have a little bit more insight to what's going on behind the scenes with the UFC, but the UFC needs this fight to happen. Jones was on social media the other day saying it's happening. We just can't say what's happening. The UFC needs this fight to happen, and Dana White, I'm never betting against him. And especially if you said he's fighting in November, you think that's happening, then I think that's happening as well. I do think Jones is obviously Jones is taking all the risk here. He's the GOAT, obviously, and an image of him laying on his back, looking up at the canvas, if Aspinall connects, I don't know if that's an image he wants to get out there. But I do think the fight happens, and the UFC needs it to happen, especially since we didn't get Ilya and Islam.
The reason I think this fight is so good is because Aspinall is one of the few guys in the history of the UFC that was good enough to beat Jones, right? That was in his division and was good enough to beat him. You might say that you thought he lost the Dominic Reyes fight or whatever, right? But the fight was what it was. But I mean, going into the fight, is there anybody on paper that you think, hey, this guy was better than Jones? And once he won the title and proved himself, no, he hasn't fought. Maybe Daniel Cormier, but even still, DC, So I think, Aspinall now, when you look at Aspinall, so there's some people I've seen, and I think they're way off base on this, Doug, that have said they think Aspinall's a fraud. And I'm like, no. Aspinall is a big 260-pound dude who is quick, who hits like a freaking truck, and who has done jujitsu since he was 5 years old.
Right.
So John Jones takes him down. Aspinall's cool. Hey, I'm in my, space. I'm happy with that. And that's always been a concern of almost everybody fighting John Jones, is you don't want to be on your back because John Jones gets those elbows going. And, but Aspinall knows how to defend there. So I think I'm not picking Aspinall, but I think it's a fight. And
he's live for sure.
It's a fight. Right now, if I had to pick today, I would pick Jones. I might, change that once we get closer to the fight and I kind of gauge each guy. But I think it is a fight, and I think that's why everybody wants to see it so much.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, social media and online petitions, you're going to get people from both camps signing that petition just to get it out there. It's not a real thing. Even like you said, it could get 10 million signatures, and Dana White.
Well, the government can't do anything about making a fight.
I know. And John Jones has built up a lot of capital. You see it in other sports leagues all the time where you have a resume where you've earned some special privilege. And I think that he has earned a little bit of that.
Let's be honest. Like, I love John, and I would say this to his face, and I have a great relationship with John, but he's being a dick in the way he's acting, right? There's no doubt about it. But having said that, I think, you're right that he has that, hey, I'm the champion. I'm the guy. He had a belt in 2011. And he's pretty much, other than when he was stripped, for periods of time, we're like more than 14 years later, and he still has a belt, right? So this is a guy that, has earned, as you called it, the privilege. I don't have a problem with, him not fighting till November. Just say it. Don't string everybody along. That's where my problem is.
There's probably a little bit of gamesmanship there. He thinks he's selling the fight by doing that too. So I can see. And
he probably is.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
The only thing I don't want it to happen is I don't want it to become Mayweather Pacquiao, right? That's what I don't want. And so, I see that. Here, I saw this question pop up. So, the problem is Jones is aging. So Jones is 30. I think he's 37, 30, right? So yep. His birthday is in July. Let me just pull it up while I'm talking to you. But do you think age is a problem for John Jones?
Not at this division. I mean, we saw I don't think so. And he's obviously been working. He's a guy that doesn't have to cut the weight anymore. No, I don't think he's aging, especially going
He's
up.
37, going to be 38 in July.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming towards the end of his career. I think this is probably his last fight, no matter what. But I still think that he is superior to Aspinall, and I would pick him. Like you said, we'll see what happens in September, and October leading up to the fight. But I don't see his age as a problem.
I'll just go, and I'll throw this out as the last thing, and then we'll move on to some other topics. But I just remember when Floyd Mayweather boxed Diego Corrales, and I was in Diego Corrales' training camp. That was 2001. I was in Corrales' training camp almost every single day, and most of the time, I was the first person ever to say Floyd Mayweather was #1 pound for pound in the world. I wrote a column for Ring Magazine saying that way back when everybody was saying it was Roy Jones, right? There was a few people saying Shane Mosley, and I'm like, it's Floyd Mayweather. It's not even close. But I thought for a while that Corrales was going to win that fight. Then I went to the press conference, and I saw Corrales and I saw Mayweather, and I saw them look at each other, and I saw something else. Both of them lived in Las Vegas, and that fight was at the MGM. And so we're walking out. I'm leaving the MGM, and who do I see coming? But on this side of me, here comes Mayweather and his crew. And on this side of me, here comes Diego Corrales and his crew. And they're going to the valet. I'm going to the parking garage. So if you can, I know you know how it works, but like if you're in the lobby of the MGM, the door straight in front of you to go to the valet. To the left is where the parking garage was. So I'm going to the left, but I see these two guys coming, and I know something is going to happen. And I looked in Diego's eyes, and there was this resignation, like, oh no, because Mayweather was, ready to roll, and he was in his face. And like Diego had been putting up with that all through training camp, all at the press conference. And I think he thought, okay, now I'm done with it until fight night. And now here's Floyd right in the crew, right in front of him. And from that moment, I said, nope, Mayweather's going to win this fight. And I think, so that's why when I say right now I'm picking Jones, but I want to see fight week, what I think. That's kind of what I'm referencing. Do you understand kind of where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic, being in MMA journalism. That fight week leading up, you see all these things like how the fighters arrive to the location where they're fighting, what they look like on the scale, what those face-offs look like. I mean, they're little idiosyncrasies, but I do pay attention to those face-offs, like you said, and see who blinks first sometimes, or who looks away first. I don't put too much credence into it, but there are some certain things that you look at in fight week for sure.
I'll tell you this. I'll tell one other story. Holyfield and Tyson, the first Holyfield-Tyson fight, 96. So that time I was working for the Las Vegas Review-Journal newspaper. And my colleague, who is now dead, Royce Fuhr, he was covering Tyson that week. So what we did, fight week, he wrote Tyson all the time. I covered Holyfield. I wrote Holyfield all the time. So I was with Holyfield the entire, he was in Las Vegas 2 weeks. Beforehand, and he just had this aura about him. I'm going to win this fight no matter what anybody said. I'm going to win this fight. I'm going to win this fight. And famously, Ron Borges is known, formerly of the Boston Globe, as the only person who ever picked that up. And he picked Holyfield. There were a couple other guys that actually picked Holyfield, but they didn't get it listed in the official poll. But he picked Holyfield. And I remember I was like, Tyson. And then after the press conference, I said, I think Holyfield is going to win this fight. And it was that same thing. You just saw the confidence in him, and he was not intimidated. And that's where we went. Let's get back to the question. So I saw somebody wanting to dog me, so we always got to go on those questions. Did Dricus injury ever happen? Does someone feed you bad information as a troll? So let me explain what he's asking about, and then I will answer the question, because I think it got taken out of context what I said. And you can actually go and read my column. So Doug, I was writing a column on what might happen at UFC 317. And I wrote a column where I was talking about, I was eliminating people. I said, well, this guy can't fight at UFC 317 for this reason. And I was going down a list of people who were there. I had talked to somebody, and if I said who that somebody was, everybody would say, okay, I know why you believed it. That somebody said to me, Drickus is injured and he probably can't fight till July or August. I made a bunch of phone calls. People at UFC I talked to, they said they didn't know about any injury. I called Drickus's camp. I made a lot of phone calls, and I could get no confirmation. So when I wrote my story, I said, out of respect for the person who told me, I said, I have heard that Drickus is injured, but there is no confirmation on it. And I put one other sentence in, I tried to find out, but if he's injured, he won't be able to fight at UFC 317. Now, interestingly enough, he's fighting at UFC 319, so I don't know, but Drickus's camp said he was fine. Later, his coach and he both said he was fine. But so I did not say that he was, definitively injured. I said I heard he was injured. But MMA Junkie wrote a freaking story and said Kevin Iole reported that he's injured. Kevin Iole had said in a column, in a 1,200 word column, 1,000 words in, I have heard he is injured. And that became a headline story on MMA Junkie, and then everybody picked it up. So Alpha X, that is the answer to that question. That is the honest to God's truth. You can go in my archives, and if you search for Drickus, you'll find it, and you can see what I'm talking about. So, I don't think the person who told me trolled me. My belief right now is that he had some sort of injury, but it wasn't a. You know how it is, Doug, right? Not a bad injury.
They're not to disclose all the injuries anyway, and
right.
And internet trolls are a thing, but your reputation stands for itself. So if you're reporting it, you can pretty much take it for gospel. So, and
it wasn't a troll, right? I know who told me. No, you don't know who told me. The public doesn't know who told me, but I know who told me, and it was a legit person with no, it wasn't like it was Hamzat's manager, right? It's not like it was Hamzat. It wasn't like it was anybody that was, that I would have said, okay, this guy has a reason to, to say something like this. It was somebody who, so we'll just leave it at that. So that was the answer to that question. Juliana Pena is a great underdog. I'm smelling an upset. You disagree. Would you take a shot at her though with that, at +5, whatever she is?
With that money, with that price, I mean, like you said, she is a tough girl, and she has that Mexican fighting spirit. So with that price, you can put a couple shekels on it, I think. I just think that Kayla is going to be too big and too strong for her.
If Kayla makes it through the weigh-in successfully, and she has to make 135, not 136, not 135 and a half, that's going to be the big thing. And I don't think she's done that yet, has she? Did she weigh 135 for Holly Holm?
I believe she was at 135. Yeah.
It could have been 136 because that's the non-title fight weight, but I'm not sure what she was. Look that up while, I'll pull up the new question. So
yeah,
we'll go here. So K1 Lover asked, UFC should introduce an atomweight division by now. They have scrapped at the 145. I'm not against that, right? I think, the problem is that I think at this point in time, there's enough good atomweights to make Invicta have a good roster, or make, some of the other organizations, but are there enough to, to have a full UFC division where you want to have at least 25, 30 people? And is there fatigue on those smaller? I think one of the problems in women's boxing, right? You look at the records and I think women's boxing is fabulous and at an all-time high in terms of quality. But Doug, you see fighters with records of 13. Well, look at Caressa Shields, right? She calls herself the GWOAT, the pound for pound #1, and she's got, what is she, 17-0 with 3 knockouts or 2 knockouts, right? People want to see finishes, and I think the smaller girls don't finish as often as the bigger, and I think that's another reason why atomweight is hard.
Yeah, and like you said, that you get these divisions, and the talent gets so stretched thin throughout them that if there's no finishes, the UFC isn't going to be able to sell them.
Right. I think that is 100% the story there.
Kayla did weigh in at 136 against Holly Holm. They both made 136. So
yeah, so she did not. She's never made 35. So at least in a fight, she made it. I know she's done it in practice. Pre-steroid heavyweight division. You say that, Cricket Lover. I think there was always good heavyweights, right? We've always had a lot of elite heavyweights. But was it, how deep was it? Like I say, the division is fire if there's more than two or three deep, right? Like if you have more than two or three people who you think have a legitimate chance to beat the champion. How many heavyweights did we ever, we had Tim Sylvia as the heavyweight champion of the UFC at one point, right? I'm not sure, like even going back to Pride, when Pride was the dominant organization, they had Crow Cop, they had Fedor. Nogueira was really a 205er in those days, but he was fighting in heavyweight. Where was the depth in that division? I think that is the issue. Like, not that there wasn't, a pocket here or there where we've had guys, hey, when Brock Lesnar came around and you had Shane Carwin and you had Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos, there was some, that was at a point, Frank Mir was still kind of hanging on, his body had, let him down before that. But I think, that's, to me, that was the issue. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I got into the game a little bit late, but I think the steroid issue, these guys are getting locked in a cage trying to kill each other. Obviously, in all sports, steroids can aid. We saw this steroid era in baseball, and home runs sell tickets. But yeah, I don't really know what to say, to be honest with you. I'm glad there's drug testing in MMA.
Let's see. Why doesn't Dana like Russian fighters? Jan's fighting the 13th rank. Mazhar not having a title shot. Tagir still fighting unranked fighters. Waterseg always fighting ranked above him. I think that you're cherry picking. Look at who some of the champions have been, right? Who they have had. Look at the rankings. I just think Jan is fighting Marcus McGee. That is going to be an unbelievable fight. So I will equate that one, Doug, and I'll get your opinion on this. Marcus McGee against Peter Yan is going to be like people complaining about Alex Barrera versus Khalil Roundtree, right? They complained about it before the fight. They didn't complain about it after the fight. So I don't think that, there's Dana Dana doesn't like Russian fighters. Dana wants the UFC to be the best it can be. And if he can put Russian fighters in great fights, he's going to do it. Now, Movsar, Dana does not like the style that Movsar fights. Wrestling, low energy, not attacking, holding back. And so that's not going to, Movsar is going to take a back seat because of his style, not because of his nationality.
Yeah, I do hold the sentiment that I do think Mozart's earned a title shot, but I do understand why he's not getting it, especially what's going on at the top of that division right now. There's just more exciting fights to see. He's a nice guy. I've talked to him. But he's not exciting. He's very stoic, and you got to have a little bit of mix of both, be able to talk, be able to have some exciting finishes, and he just doesn't have that capability. So
yeah.
I do think he eventually gets one, especially if he continues winning. But it could be like a Merab or Magomed Ankalaev situation where, yeah, he's the clear-cut number one contender, but the fight isn't exciting.
He is fighting Aaron Pico next.
Yeah.
So Aaron Pico is going to be a good fight for him. Pico making his UFC debut when he fights Movsar. I think that's going to be a fun fight. If he beats Aaron Pico, I think he deserves a title shot. But I just think the broader question, I think you're just, picking nits where there's nothing there.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, look at the champions that we've had. I mean, Khabib's considered one of the GOATs. We have Islam. I don't think that Dana doesn't like Russian fighters. I think he doesn't like certain fighters' styles, like you said.
Right. Let's go down. Let's keep going on here. Do you think we could see a Shavkat versus Hamza dream fight in the future? It's been afloat since 22. I'll let you go first on that one. Go ahead. What do you think?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got distracted in the chat. What was it? Can you put the question back up?
Yes, I said, do you think we could see Shavkat versus Hamzat? It's been afloat since 22.
I I mean, that is a super fight for sure. We don't know what's going on with Shavkat right now, do we? I mean, there's
Well, he's recovering from surgery. So he had the leg surgery. So he's recovering from surgery.
we don't know a timetable on his return though, and I just think there's so much more. And I don't necessarily think Hamzat runs through Dreykus. I think that's a very close fight too. So
Well, and Hamzat's in 185 and he's in 170. So that's
right,
I don't think Hamzat is going back.
Hamzat, well, we won't see Hamzat fight at 170 again. No, he would have to move up. That's a huge fight, but I think we got to see what happens with his injury recovery and what happens against DDP.
And I'll say this, I'm not dogging Hamzat when I say this. Excuse me, I'm not dogging Shavkat when I say this, but he still has to be proven, right? His best win right now is Ian Machado Gary. And I think that's a good win. Don't get me wrong, but Ian took the fight on short notice. And Ian, still not at that very top level. Shavkat he beat Jeff Neal and that was impressive. But, I want to see Shavkat before we're talking about him moving up divisions and challenging a guy that is potentially a champion. I want to see Shavkat beat an elite 170 and he hasn't. I hate to say that because he beat Ian Gary, and I think Ian Gary's elite, but you know what I'm saying. Ian Gary still doesn't have that reputation yet.
Yeah, and heading into that Ian Gary fight, I mean, Shavkat, like you said, Ian took that fight on short notice, and Ian held his own, obviously. I mean, Ian thinks he won the fight. I still had it short for Shavkat, but it was a lot closer than people envisioned, I think.
Yeah, it was a good fight. Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think Ian Gary's legit. He's a defensive fighter, which some people don't like, but I think he's legit. Here's another good question. Why do you think Islam got forcefully stripped? Even he said he would come back to fight Ilya. The problem, I know the answer to this because I've talked to the UFC about it. They get held up. So guys, publicly they say they're going to fight multiple times a year. Privately, they don't want to do that, right? And so you're holding up a division when that happens. And so basically they no longer want to do that. So it would have to be a really, 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 really special case. And as great as Islam is, and Islam, to my mind, is the best fighter in the world today, he doesn't cut it, right? You can't defend. Think of the two divisions, right? How great those divisions are. And you can't, sit there and say, okay, I'm going to make the whole lightweight division wait a year, and then I'm going to make the welterweight division wait. And that's the simple, of it. Forget about two division champions.
I mean, yeah, and you could potentially make an interim title fight if that were the case, but no one really wants to see interim title fights. No one really takes those seriously anyway.
And I have a problem. Like, I don't think Tom Aspinall right now, it's going to be controversial, but I don't think Tom Aspinall right now should be interim champion. Once Jones came back, then, now we don't need an interim champion anymore. He should be the number one contender. I know they don't want to strip him because he did everything that he was asked to do, and he sat there, so they want to let him. But the purpose of an interim champion is to not hold up a division. So as an example, when John Jones got injured, and he was supposed to fight Stipe in 23, and he got injured and that fight got put off. Now they had no idea how long Jones was going to be out. So they said, well, we could, have Stipe fight somebody else. Stipe didn't want to fight anybody else. So they had Pavlovich and Aspinall fight for the interim belt so that two guys would get a crack at the belt. Now, when Jones came back, Jones now insists on fighting Stipe as opposed to, the interim champion. And that's where we are. But I don't think interim champions should exist except in very narrow circumstance. So if the champion has a long-term injury, that's where I think that, that we should have an interim champion. But other than that, no.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment for sure.
Let's throw this quick one up. This is kind of a follow-up question. Do I see Islam retiring after JDM? Doug, do you see Islam retiring?
I think I don't know. I think if he, I don't think he does. No, I think if he gets that belt, if he does win, I think he wants to defend to add to his legacy. And if he loses, I don't think he can go out on that shield. Right. So I think he does go up to 170 and beat JDM. And then I think he defends the title there one time at least before he calls it quits. He does seem like he's probably considered it, but I think I think there's just too much more for him to fight.
Yeah, I think he wants to win a third title. No, I don't think any chance in hell. He's not big enough to win a middleweight championship. As great as he is, and you talk to the other fighters, and they all say, it's kind of like the golfers when they talked about Tiger Woods after Tiger became Tiger, right? Like, okay, Tiger's in a different class, so I'll pick Tiger to win this tournament. And I think they realize that about Islam, right?
For sure.
They realize how good Islam is. So I think that they understand, that, but I think if you start talking to them, hey, can Islam go from 155 to 170 and win the title? I think Jack's going to give him a hell of a fight.
Oh, I think I don't think it's a walkover. Yeah.
Everybody's saying, Islam has got that, but okay, let's say he gets past Jack for the sake of argument. Now do you go up another 15 pounds and fight Drickus, who is like 220 in between, right?
Drickus could fight at 205, so that's a huge jump. And and adding 15 pounds, I mean, that's hard to do. That's especially at that age too.
Let's get some of these more here. What's up, Paul? Paul is a big Larry Holmes fan, so always good to see him on here. Stamp Fairtex, many other gems fast as lightning. Yeah, there are, but they're in other organizations. I don't think one is going to give up their roster so that the UFC can build an atomweight roster, right? So I think that's it. Sakuraba middleweights were fighting in heavyweight. There's a thing there. Let's see. Okay, this is what is this name? I was going to say Bruce. Boosie the Beaver.
I think it's Bucci's, the famous store down in the Midwest or whatever.
Okay, my mistake there. Will the UFC sign with Netflix alone, or do you see them potentially adding Amazon Prime as well? Doug, you want a shot at that, or you want me to go?
I don't know what's happening with this. I think my gut tells me they stay with ESPN just because they already have that relationship. And I don't think they want to necessarily go to a model with Netflix where they aren't charging for the pay-per-views. I just don't see it as feasible. And I also think Netflix wants to get the UFC doesn't have anything to sell to Netflix right now. I don't think,
dude, my friend.
I mean, if Sean O'Malley wins, then you can say, yeah, then there is a lack of star power amongst the champions, is what I'm saying.
What does UFC have that nobody else has? They have content on a regular basis, and you're a streaming service, and the fighters come and go, right? So Conor McGregor was here 5 years ago. He's gone now. Right. John Jones is going to be gone, but the brand is there. And they deliver you big time content. And so you're going to get, as it stands now, and I Dana even said they're not married to pay-per-view. It's the money, right? And I'll explain that in a second. But so they have, 14 pay-per-views a year. Their goal is they know not everyone's going to pan out. They hope that everyone pans out, but they know not everyone is going to be a big hit. So they're hoping to get 5 or 6, oh my God, that was an unbelievable pay-per-view, 5 or 6 that are that was a good pay-per-view. And then the other 2, we tried, right? We couldn't get it. And then you have those fight nights, and then you want to get a number of fight nights that are oh man, this could have been a pay-per-view card, right? So then you have the Contender Series, you have the Ultimate Fighter, you all those different things, looking for a fight that they do, that they can put on to whatever service they go to, whether it's Amazon, ESPN, Netflix, whatever. So right now, ESPN pays them a set fee for, every pay-per-view, right? It was a big amount, but the way it's paid is they pay it out, so UFC 316 is coming. There's a chunk of money dedicated to that ESPN pays them for that. And so UFC really at that point has no stake in how the pay-per-view does. If it goes really crazy, then they come back in and they share, but ESPN gets the bulk of that right now. So if Netflix or Amazon or Apple or Google or anybody else came in a streaming service and said, we want to buy out the pay-per-view rights. The UFC is not married to pay-per-view. The UFC is married to the money that they get from those big pay-per-views because those are their big shows. So in answer, you said it was Bucci?
I think so.
Okay.
Bucci. Yep.
Bucci, in answer to your question, I do think that they're going to have multiple partners, and I think they could even have 3 partners. I agree with Doug that I think ESPN will stick around in some form. I think, and I'm not even ruling out ESPN as their marquee partner. I think it's up in the air and it's going to come down to money and negotiations. But if I had to guess right now, I would say Netflix, ESPN, and potentially Amazon. That would be, where I would go.
Let me ask you this question, Kevin. But if you think that they're going to be split up between different platforms, do you think that affects the user experience at all, and maybe potentially hinders bringing in a new audience? Because now you have to have all these different apps to be able to follow the sport.
That is true, but I mean, I think they look at the NFL and they say, "Hey, the NFL is on, ESPN, NFL Network, NBC, CBS,
Prime.
and people find it and watch it, right?
Yeah,
And they like it." And so, I think that the way sports media is going and the way just television is going, it's going increasingly. And I think. I remember when we first got cable, I was in first grade and cable came in, and the picture you don't remember these things, but guys, I'm going to tell you the truth. There were things called rabbit ears, right? And you would put them on top of your TV set and you move them around and pull them out and put the other one in and try to get a picture. And sometimes you had to bang the side of the TV to get it from flipping and have it and snow and all this. And then cable came, and the picture, we thought it was great. Like, little do we know it sucked, but at the time we thought that the picture was great. But I think in my lifetime, cable TV is going away. I don't think you're going to see where cable TV is the dominant service anymore. I think you're going to be able, Cox, where we live in Las Vegas, has the cable rights to Las Vegas, and they were just bought by Charter. It's going to be renamed Spectrum here in Las Vegas. And I don't have a feeling the Spectrum is going to last that long in Las Vegas. I think you'll see, they go into streaming, and we're going to have all these, you can have a bunch of them. So that's kind of where I think it's going to be. So, in answer to your question, Doug, I think it's going to be an issue people have to find, but I also think it's going to be simpler. They're going to know, okay, I have to have a Netflix account, I have to have an Amazon account, or I have to have an ESPN. And ESPN is also coming out with a new streaming service.
Right.
And that streaming service is going to be pretty comprehensive. And I know that they know there's some problems with ESPN Plus. And I think that this new service is, hopefully going to fix that. And I think we'll see how good ESPN is at convincing UFC that they can do it. Because I think that Dana's really big into user experience. And I think if he feels like, and I think he's starting to feel like, the ESPN user experience is falling off a little bit, then that hurts ESPN despite the money.
Yeah, I mean, I was able to go to WrestleMania and then watch the production Netflix did of that after the fact, and their production, like putting on a show, is definitely their thing. So
yeah,
maybe they do go to Netflix.
Now the UFC will do the production no matter where they go.
Right.
So, that's how they do it. So they're going to have it. But I think, the fact that Netflix will be open to doing things for them, will be something.
They might have the upper hand there too, because of the relationship with TKO too. So,
yeah. So let's see. This is Joshua, no Apex for the next 7 events. Do you see this as a new normal? Apex would become for random events. I think before, like if you go back before the pandemic, they went all over the place, right? Now they had fight nights in Vegas, but they had fights everywhere. And that's what Dana wants to get back to. And Dana believes, and I think with some evidence, that taking the show on the road enables them to become bigger, in other markets. So his belief is if you go to a live show, you're going to be hooked as a UFC fan. And as a result of that, I think that they want to be able to get back out there. They have an investment in Apex, and so certainly they're never going to abandon Apex. But I think more and more, Doug, you're going to see them go on the road for fight nights.
Yeah, and I think they are doing a bunch of renovations at the Apex now too, and increasing the capacity from what I've heard. So, I mean, the Apex isn't going away, but Dana definitely wants to be on the road.
Yeah, no doubt that. We got a few more questions here. You got time to hang in with them?
Yeah.
All right, let's see what we have here. So this one is one I don't have an answer for. Do you have any new info on John Silva? I heard a rumor he was fighting Arnold Allen. Have you heard anything, Doug?
I have not. There were some rumors circulating on social a couple days ago that he was going to fight Diego Lopez, but I don't think anything has been confirmed, which that would be a hell of a fight.
Let's see. Bryce Mitchell. I don't even want to talk about Bryce Mitchell. You want? I'll let you want to answer anything on Bryce Mitchell.
I prefer not to talk about Bryce Mitchell.
Okay, sorry about that, Tubby. We will answer any questions, but I'm not a Bryce Mitchell fan after his comments, and especially after the way he conducted himself at the pre-fight. At his last show before the John Silva fight, and talking about shooting dogs, like, dude, are you out of your mind?
He had an opportunity to show some remorse there, and he obviously didn't choose that. So
goodbye, Bryce Mitchell. Do you think Usman Nurmagomedov to UFC is going to happen? I do think that will happen, but I also know that PFL can't just keep bleeding stars, right? And Usman is a star fighter, not a star personality, but he's a star elite fighter. And Khabib showed that Russian fighters can be stars. Islam, people argue with me on this, and I mentioned it to UFC, and they were laughing. A lot of the people at UFC that are in the know, they were laughing when people were telling me Islam is not a star. I said Islam is absolutely a freaking star.
Absolutely.
And believe me, he is a massive star. And anybody who thinks he's not doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
Doug, we got a question about you, by the way.
What's that? Anyone ever tell you looking Matt Rule? No, I have not gotten that one. I don't know if I like that comparison or not, but I've never gotten that. I've gotten Aaron Lewis from Stained a lot, and I've gotten Joe Rogan before, but
Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I get compared to old people, right? So I've been compared to John Lithgow. So that's
I've never heard that, but I do see it a little bit.
All right, let's move on here. If Hamzat were to run through Dricus, do you think people who doubted him would finally give him credit? I see a lot of haters online saying he hasn't got 5 rounds, he hasn't proven himself. Swampy, I will say this. The haters are going to hate, right? And people have an opinion, and they're not going to give their opinion up easily. I think Hamzat is a legitimately great fighter. And I say great, capital G, capital R, capital E, capital A, capital T. I think he is freaking a phenomenal fighter. That doesn't mean I think he's going to beat Dricus, because Dricus is also a phenomenal fighter, and Dricus is a big dude. But people's opinions are going to be what they are, right? They're going to base it on emotion, not fact. And, so you're not going to change their mind. So I don't think that we're going to see Hamzat get, some people think he's overrated. Some people think he's underrated.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's so much people doubting him. I think it's just questions, legitimate questions. He hasn't been really tested yet. But yeah, he's a phenomenon. What he did to Robert Whittaker, I mean, yeah.
Wow. Any idea where UFC 320 will be in September? It's going to be in San Antonio, but it's not going to be UFC 320 now. It's just going to be a fight night. So they moved it to San Antonio. So it's just going to be a fight night. There will be a show in Paris. I forget the date of it, but UFC 320 went from Guadalajara because the arena is not finished and is going to San Antonio. And what was my point that I was going to I think that's also potentially tied into the Canelo Crawford boxing.
Interesting.
So we'll see what happens there. Islam versus Chimaev. Is it a super fight at 185? Doug, is it a super fight?
If it happens, it's absolutely a super fight. I don't envision a scenario we see it anytime soon.
Yeah,
we talked about that earlier. Islam going up to 185. I mean, and Hamzat, I don't think is going to make 170 anymore. So I just don't think it's realistic.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. Let's see, what do we got here? I think the UFC is pitching a Jones fight, 2 Conor fights to Netflix in order to get the $1 billion deal. I said before, I think the UFC is going to end up with a rights fee of $1 billion, but I never said that they were going to get it from one person. I think it's going to come in aggregate from all their deals, that when you look at it at the end of the day, it is going to be that way. And I just don't see Conor McGregor fighting again, right? I think Conor is done, and I don't think the UFC is trying to sell Conor. If Conor comes back, it's a bonus. Like, I think everybody they're negotiating with knows that Conor McGregor is alive, exists, and he's there, but they're not making business decisions based on Conor McGregor. If Conor McGregor decides he wants to fight, then great, it's a bonus and we get a Conor McGregor fight, but I don't think that anybody is thinking that he's going to fight.
Yeah, I did a video for Sports Illustrated a couple weeks ago where I don't think we ever see Conor McGregor inside a UFC octagon again. And Bucci, like, I don't think that the UFC or Dana White would go to the negotiating table in good faith pitching a Conor fight when I don't even think they know what's going on with him.
And look, just think about it. Conor is a fighter, but Conor here, I've said this on other live chats, and if you've heard me say this, I apologize for repeating it, but I think it's worth repeating. If there was somebody that said, hey, I will fight Conor today and go to T-Mobile Arena and they can fight, Conor would do it. I think he loves to fight. What Conor doesn't love to do is, because he has so much money, is he doesn't love to train. And you cannot take a major fight. Doug, maybe me or you, he would fight us without training, and I think he'd handle business, right?
Yes.
But I think, outside of us, and outside of Bucci the Beaver, I think outside of the three of us, he needs to train. And I think that in that situation, he doesn't want to train anymore, and he doesn't have the discipline to train anymore. And I think that's where it falls apart. Like, I think he loves to fight, and when he says he's coming back, and I think he believes that. But then he gets in the middle of training camp and this hurts and that hurts, and he's got $100 million in the bank, and he's like, screw that.
Yeah, it's hard. When you get that kind of money, it's hard to stay motivated. I mean, I don't have any experience having that type of money. I'm assuming it's hard to stay motivated when you have that kind of cash. But yeah, I mean, he's involved with BKFC. Maybe we see him take a fight there. He's talked about fighting Mike Perry. I don't see it anywhere in the near future we see Conor in an octagon again.
I don't think we see him fight anywhere, and the reason that I don't is, he's under contract to UFC. Yeah, and right, so they're not going to let him go to fight. No. Like, imagine if Conor fought in BKFC now, right? That would be huge. People would be going nuts, blah 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 blah. Conor McGregor's coming to fight, and there'd be a lot of money in that fight, right? And UFC would just be giving that up unless somebody, BKFC paid them a shitload of money to let them do it, which I don't know why. I don't think BKFC has that kind of money to pay it out in the first place and then still be profitable with, with the Conor fight. So I just think, he's not going to fight again. I think we've seen the last of him. And if he was going to fight, look, he's healthy enough. He was injured in 2000. What was he injured? 2021. We are now in 2025, and there's never been a sign toward him fighting. He took the one training camp, and Conor McGregor pulled out of a fight with a broken toe and was replaced by Alex Pereira, who had 2 broken toes. And Alex Pereira fought, and Conor McGregor did not. What does that tell you?
Yeah. Speaking of toes, Marab posted that funny photo online of his toe the other day, but I think it's a non-starter. I think he's fun.
No story. Couple more questions and we'll get you out of here, and appreciate everybody for joining us. I have a feeling Usman and Dakota are on the UFC radar.
I would hope that they are. They're probably I think Dakota is the biggest star the PFL has right now. And yeah, I would hope that they're on their radar. I don't, like you said, PFL needs to kind of stop bleeding talent. So there would be a lot of negotiations that would have to go on for them to come over anytime soon. But Dakota Ditchva is a massive, massive star. Maybe the UFC opens up the purses for, we'll see.
Here's the thing that I think, PFL considers itself Major League MMA, right? Not AAA. And so if you are Major League MMA and you let Aaron Pico and, all these fighters that have gone over, Patricio Pitbull and,
yeah.
and all these other fighters that
Patricio.
go, you're giving up a lot of your talent. And who are you replacing them with and developing the talent? So I think, as long as they continue to say we are Major League MMA, I think that they're going to make a run. Now, when her contract is up, they may not be able to keep her, right? Patchy Mix, who I am doing an interview with today, and so you can look for that video soon, came over. But I think Patchy was a little bit of a different scenario, right? I just think, the PFL's got to decide what it is. And, they're making some moves. So hopefully that will be good. That I want to see the PFL succeed. I've been critical of the PFL, but I want to see them succeed. I don't want them to fail. I'm frustrated by some of the things they do. I think they promote horribly, and I think that they should do better, but
it's mind-boggling, their promotion. And I want them to succeed too. It's good for the sport, but like, they just had a big fight last weekend or the weekend before that US audience couldn't even watch, and they did, like, anytime you try to find a fight, you have to like go searching. So I want them to succeed, but they have to figure out some stuff for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt. So let's see, we got a couple more questions here. I think Brad was talking about Conor McGregor there, I think, and so, yeah, so he says Conor down below. Is Conor capable of beating top fighters? I agree he is not. I think he's an entertaining guy. You'd have to pick the right opponent for him. You couldn't put him in there with top one or two guys. He's not going to do that. But I think you get him in a guy, in the right, weight, and, I think Mauricio Hoofy, right? Would that be a fight for Conor? I think Hoofy's probably advanced past Conor
I
at this
think
point.
Conor's past him at that point, yeah.
But that, there are some of the things there. So anyways, let's see.
Maybe we finally get Conor Chandler if it ever, anyway.
And this is talking about UFC 320 in Perth. David Shaw, who is the head of UFC International, said if Volk was able to go in September and they had a good opponent, that they would put him on that, and there was a good chance that they would elevate that to a pay-per-view. So that is coming straight from David Shaw, who will say nothing unless it's approved by Dana and or Ari Emanuel. So when David Shaw says that, you can believe it. So I think, they have not announced that yet. Until it's announced, it's not official. Things could change. We don't know the behind the scenes, arena availability and all the other things. But Terzi, I would think, in my opinion, that, when they put UFC 320 back on the map, it's going to be in Australia with JDM and Islam would be my guess in the main event, unless they hold them for Abu Dhabi. Anything, Doug, on that one?
I mean, we had heard rumors that before the fight night or the Noche got canceled in Guadalajara, that Volk is going to defend against Yair. Have you heard that?
That was what they were planning for Guadalajara.
Right.
Now that Guadalajara is off, that may be a totally different thing, right? I think it's still going to be Noche. So does Volk fight there? I think not. No. What I would think might happen would be a co-main event of Volk versus who, we don't know right now. Volk versus a contender at 145, and a main event of Islam versus JDM. That I think would have appeal locally in Australia. The timing would make it easy, because it's going to be morning over there.
Yep.
Be prime time over here. I think it would make it easy to have a good show. So I would not be shocked if that is it.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about Volk fighting Mosvar. I do think Mosvar should be next, but I think it's probably going to be Yair the way it's looking.
I'm going to just say this. I'm just pulling it up so I don't miss anybody. But the Boxing Hall of Fame is inductions are on Saturday, and I want to just acknowledge the fighters that are going in. So I'm just pulling the list of inductees up. I wrote a column on Manny Pacquiao that's out there today, and I kind of talked about how good Manny Pacquiao is from a all-time standpoint. You know, I have people saying top 25, top 50. I think that's probably a fair thing. But going into the Hall of Fame, then the non-fighters list is going to be Randy Gordon, who's now on Sirius XM. He was the commissioner in New York for a long time. He was the editor of KO magazine, did the fights on USA Network. Ross Greenberg, the executive producer of HBO Sports for such a long time, and referee Kenny Bayless. And then going back to the fighters, Manny Pacquiao, Vinny Paz, who I had campaigned for Vinny Paz for a while, Michael second to none, Mary Jo Sanders, Jessica Chavez, and Anne-Sophie Mathis fought a great fight with Holly Holm. Anne-Sophie Mathis going into the Hall of Fame as well. The old-timer is Rodrigo Valdez, who should have been in before, but he's finally going in now. Owen Swift, Kathy Davis, and Al Gavin and Harry Gibbs. That is the group. Congratulations to them. Very happy with them, and we will we will see.
Have you been up to the Boxing Hall for the inductions before?
You know, I have never been. I've never gone. Believe it
Really?
or not, I was nominated this year, so I might have had to go. But you know, as they say, what did Trump say? Somebody fool with the votes. I think that's what happened with me, right?
Yeah.
Somebody fool with the votes. How the hell did I not get in there?
Exactly.
But you know, no, I've actually never made it up there. So you know, there's always been a UFC show that I've had to cover that weekend, and so I haven't made it. But I was upset that I didn't go last year. I forget why I couldn't go last year, but anyways.
Maybe we take a road trip next year.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. So last thing there, I see somebody ask if I would do an MMA Joey collab. Of course, I like MMA Joey. He's a good guy. I talk to him a lot. So, but you don't like Doug? Come on. Doug is doing a great job on here. What the hell's the matter with you?
MMA Joey is very good at what he does. I'm not offended.
So, Doug, tell people if they want to read your stuff where they can find it and watch your stuff.
Yeah, so most of the stuff I do is video. You can find all of it on Sports Illustrated's YouTube channel and on SI.com. I had taken a little bit of break from the writing, but I'm going to have a betting column coming regularly starting this week for 316. So yeah, SI.com and Sports Illustrated's YouTube channel and all of our social handles.
What is your social?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I'm at Doug Does Fights on X and on Instagram.
There you go. You can get me at Kevin I on X and Kevin Iole on Facebook and Instagram. So I am there. I would love to talk to you online. Doug, I appreciate it, my man. 1 hour and 15 minutes. We gabbed a lot. I hope we were informative. Thank you so much for a great job today.
I appreciate it. You were the informative one. I was just along for the ride.
Guys, we appreciate you. Check out KevinIole.com today. I have a story on Manny Pacquiao going in the Hall of Fame. I have a great story about Kayla Harrison up there. I encourage you to read that because she is really an amazing person, talking about the loss in her career and how it affected her. Really a funny story that she tells. Check that out. I appreciate you. I have Patchy Mix today, so check for that interview and a lot more coming soon. We will see you guys. Be well.
See ya.
Bye.